Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So since about 2012 I've been journaling on and off, and I've really wondered whether it's beneficial or not. So in the last 30 days I've set myself a challenge to journal every day and see if there really are some benefits that you can get from journaling. And so in this video we're going to talk about four main things. Firstly, we're going to talk about why bother journaling in the first place. Secondly, we're going to talk about how I personally journal and the two methods I use, and as part of that we're going to talk about journaling physically using pen and paper and journaling through apps. Thirdly, we're going to talk about the benefits I've obtained personally from journaling, and then fourthly and finally we're going to end with some ideas about how you might go about journaling and some tips if you wanted to give it a go. So let's dive right in and go to part one, which is all about why bother journaling in the first place. So journaling is surprisingly good for you. There's plenty of evidence that suggests that it's good for you physically and mentally. And the reason I wanted to give journaling a proper go was because I am a terrible procrastinator, and I wondered whether journaling might help, and I wanted to focus on journaling to see if it might make me more productive. And really the main benefit that I've found from journaling is that it does make you more productive because it helps calm your mind. Something that I've found when I'm journaling is that it helps me get my emotions out on paper, and by doing that it helps me work through those emotions. It helps me explore the reasons for the emotions that I have and get those down, and often it results in a list of things that I need to do that those emotions are associated with. But perhaps more importantly, it helps me think about my direction of travel in life, the decisions I'm making, and work those through in slightly slower time to evaluate those decisions. And once I've evaluated them and decided on the approach, also it helps put some energy behind them. And by putting some energy behind them, it helps me stop procrastinating and put some real effort into them. I can go from days and days of unproductive effort to days when I can get through vast amounts of work almost effortlessly. So when I journal, I get more productive days, and when I journal, I'm more likely to use my time well. And for that reason, I set myself a 30-day challenge to journal every day. Part two, the journaling method. And this time around I used two journaling methods, and it was surprisingly helpful to do this, although I did find one method a lot more effective than the other. And the main method I'm using is to journal with this workbook. It's an A5 workbook with a pen, my trusty Uniball fine pen, which I find fantastic, but A5 workbook, ruled lines, and I use that every day. And the way I go about journaling is to use the morning pages type approach. It's a technique for journaling that Julia Cameron gave us through her book The Artist's Way. And the idea behind morning pages is that you grab your journal first thing in the morning, you go and sit down and you write 3 pages straight off. And the idea is that it's a stream of consciousness. You just write whatever comes into your head, and you just write that for three pages. And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be absolute rubbish, it could be what you're thinking about at that moment, it could be what you're worrying about. The practice is simply to write. I was taught this method back in 2012 when I was on a leadership program that was all about finding your authentic self, finding a way to lead from that still space inside. And journaling was one of the methods we used to slowly find that space. And rediscovering morning pages, settling down at the start of the day to just write, has enabled me to find that space again. And writing them by hand, really whether I have anything to say or not, forcing the words onto the page enables me to find balance and find a place of calm at the start of the day. And this helps me settle my brain, helps me to concentrate throughout the day. And also something that I hadn't really noticed until I went through this practice, kind of forcing myself to do this every day, I did notice that it increases my creativity as well. Probably not as noticeable for me as others have found that, but I have noticed an increase in creativity. And I'd also say it just makes the day go a little bit easier. Again, I probably wouldn't have noticed that if I hadn't done this consistently for 30 days, but I have noticed that the days are just that little bit easier because of it. And as I said, I do this journaling in a very unstructured way. I start with a blank piece of paper and I just write the first thing that comes into my head, and sometimes nothing comes into my head and I almost have to write, well, nothing's coming into my head, and just go on from there. So sometimes it's easier than others, but if you just keep writing stuff, it opens up and you start to have a dialogue with yourself about things that are important to you. Now, sometimes I have an unusual day where I have to get up really early, have to go to meetings, have to travel a lot, and on those occasions it's really difficult for me to start with journaling. And on those days I use an app. In the past I've used an app called Day One, which is a fantastic app for journaling, for keeping a diary. You can do loads of things with it and just type on that, and it's great, I suppose, for keeping a diary and a note of what you're up to and something you can look back on over time. I don't tend to use that for this type of journaling. I simply open a note. So let's talk now about the benefits of journaling. So talking about the benefits of journaling, some people talk about the benefits of journaling as being creative, helping with their creativity. And as I said before, I have found that by constantly, continually journaling every day and getting through my 3 pages every morning, that practice over time has slowly helped with my creativity. So that's a fantastic positive, but it's not really the main benefit that I've got from journaling. The main advantage I've found is that it settles me. It helps me be more balanced, and by being more settled and more balanced, it also helps with my focus and my concentration, and as a result it helps in my productivity. In fact, it helps a lot with my productivity. And I think it helps with productivity because it enables me to put aside my worries, my insecurities, and just focus on the tasks at hand. Perhaps it's a bit like meditation in that way. And I think it does it because it helps me explore my emotions and work them through. And then by working them through, either identify things that I should be doing, in which case I make a note of those, or things that I'm worrying about and can't actually do anything about, and it allows me to have had that worry, recognize it's there, and kind of put it to one side for now to come back to. And I mentioned my emotion. That's probably a really key part of it. It helps me process my emotions. So when I journal first thing in the morning, I almost always start out with negative emotions. I'm always worrying about something, and so that's often where my journal starts, and exploring where they're coming from, what's causing them. It slowly brings me to a more positive place. So by the end of my 3 pages, I am in a much more positive emotional state to continue my day. And feeling positive and calm really makes my day, and that's probably one of the biggest things that have come out of this 30-day challenge. And the other thing I just want to talk about in terms of the practice, doing it in the morning, doing the morning pages, is that I think it's a mistake to do what some people do, which is they need something to start them off. They need a question to answer, or a quote, or a saying, or some way to start their writing off. And I think that's a mistake, because I think that the whole idea behind this is to get in touch more and more with yourself. And to do that, you have to give yourself the space to listen to what's going on inside you. And having something direct that is probably not, well, I have found that that's not the way to do it. So I found sitting there, even if it's really uncomfortable because you don't know what to write, and just allowing yourself a few moments, a few minutes to write something, even as I said, even if it's rubbish, even if it's I can't think of anything, just starts to get you in touch with yourself. And it's really important to carve out the space and the time where you can do this. You need enough time. You need to feel like you're not going to be rushed. You need to feel like you can allow yourself the space to relax into yourself and your writing. And so kind of scheduling 30 minutes to do this, that I would say is probably key. Part 4, some tips to getting started. So let's just talk about a few tips to help you get started with journaling, if that's what you'd like to have a go at. I think the first tip is to just get started. For me, I found setting the 30-day challenge was really, really helpful. I just got myself a sheet of paper, wrote the 30-day challenge on the top, wrote a box for each day of the 30 days, and then crossed off each day I'd done. And just doing that made me just have enough of a thought each morning, oh, I need to do a 30-day challenge. And by developing it for the 30 days, I'm keeping going with it. I would say if you look closely at this, there were 3 days on here, one Saturday and then one weekend, where I didn't keep it up. But I didn't criticize myself for that. I didn't tell myself I was terrible or anything. I just went, fine, next day I'm going to do it. And those were probably the days where it was more difficult for me to use my physical diary to write. But really, finding any way to get started is tip number 1. You don't need to worry about having a fancy book or a fancy pen or a fancy app. Just get started. Tip number 2, some people find it useful to anchor it. So I anchored it, I suppose, by doing a 30-day challenge. Some people try and anchor the habit, the new habit, by attaching it to something else. So maybe setting up their diary for the day, or sitting down first thing with their coffee, or something that they do already, and you just attach it to that and create that as the anchor. That can be really useful to help you get started. The third thing I'd say is don't worry too much about what you're writing. In fact, scrap that. Don't worry at all about what you're writing. You can write absolute rubbish for 30 days straight, and that will be fine, and that will be beneficial, I can promise you. Don't worry about answering questions or thinking deeply about stuff. It'll come if it wants to, and whichever way it will help you with your day and with your creativity and with your emotions. So sit down with a blank piece of paper and just write something. And my final tip is, you can write any time of the day, you can write wherever you want, but I've found that if you can, the best time to write is first thing before you start work. It gives you the best benefit I've found, and it really sets you up for the day ahead. You can journal at other times as well, and actually some people find it very beneficial to journal before they go to bed for similar reasons really. It stops them overthinking before they go to bed and probably helps them get a good night's sleep. But I would say if you're starting the practice, start in the morning, see how it goes. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really enjoyed talking to you about this topic. I hope you get some value out of it, and look forward to seeing you on the next one.